You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, and welcome again to the Monster Sci-Fi Show. I am your host, The Monster, and for today's podcast, albeit I'm going to be talking about M.O.D.O.K. I'm doing M.O.D.O.K. at the time of this recording a different way. The reason why I'm saying that is because I'm trying to be productive while I'm doing the library programs, my Geek Outs. So sometimes I use like the Dune Book Club as a reference point that if you listen to that podcast or seen the video version of that, you'll understand what I'm trying to do with this. So you do see there's going to be a visual presentation, which if you're just listening to me, well then it's just audio, so you get the idea. But I'm trying to combine the two, just kind of like work a little bit more efficiently. So the weird thing that I try to do with my podcast, especially for the Geek Out, is that when I plan stuff out, whenever it airs, whenever it's fully done, like some shows drop all the episodes like Jupiter's Legacy, and some others like Falcon and Winter Soldier and WandaVision, they were doing theirs weekly. So when that final episode finished, or when that series drops, I try to schedule at least a month later to give enough time to watch it and maybe watch it 2 more times, just so I can be prepared to do a program like this. So the weird thing is, this came out not that long ago. I think it was May something in the 20s. I forget the date, but it was only a couple weeks ago. And I actually thought that, since all the episodes dropped, which is rare for Hulu to do, I can watch all the episodes. And, there were only 10 episodes and maybe about 20 something minutes long, so it's doable. Well, time was ticking, and I never got to watching M.O.D.O.K. And even with the last podcast with The Invincible, I'm like, I still didn't even see the series. So literally, I watched the series, I think it was on Monday-ish, Tuesday, definitely, and I finished the last episode this morning. So, in that time span, I had to kind of come up with this presentation. And again, I'm not expecting anyone to show up for my Geek Out, which is going to be in about an hour. But I have to prepare myself like I'm talking to you to give you information that if you're interested in watching M.O.D.O.K, here's some cool things that you should know. But let's just start off with this right off the bat. If you haven't seen it, then don't listen to this podcast, because I'm going to kind of go into some spoiler territory. Okay? But in fairness, let's talk about the thing that I don't know about, which is rare. Because, the thing about Marvel stuff is like, especially when it comes to TV, I try to know as much as I can. And I knew of M.O.D.O.K, but to know more about M.O.D.O.K, that's not a thing that I'm that familiar. So it's just kind of weird that happened. But let's start off with this. One of the cool things that I love is watching superhero parody shows, right? So, for example, back in the day, I saw Underdog, Captain Courageous and Minute Mouse, Darkwing Duck, there's The Tick, there's Freakazoid, and that's all great, and those are just fantastic shows that kind of poke fun at the superhero genre and doesn't take itself seriously. But on the same token, there are very, very little, if any, supervillain parody shows. So the only thing that comes to mind is going to be like Harley Quinn. which is fantastic. And if you have not watched it, I highly recommend it, because if you want to have something that's really adult content, that's animated, that's still kind of within that DC superhero genre wheelhouse, Harley Quinn is definitely going to fit that bill for you, because it is perfect. It is adorable. A lot of it is adorable, and I love it. And then we have Pinky and the Brain, which is not really necessarily like a superhero villain or a super villain like you would see in the comics or in the movies, but it's still kind of like, you know, if you know Pinky and the Brain, they're trying to do world domination. You know, how does the show end every single time? Whereas, you know, Brain says, you know, trying to take over the world. Well, that's what happens. But it never fulfills. So sometimes you have a villain that has these grand plans, but never is able to fulfill them. So that's where we get into M.O.D.O.K. At least for this series, it kind of plays into that sense of, this is a really second, maybe third, even much lower tiered villain who doesn't even have a name that people like even recognize, let alone are like scared about. But before we get into a further reveal about M.O.D.O.K, the cool thing that I thought was interesting, news came out through Marvel Television, this is years ago, that they're planning to do a M.O.D.O.K series. And Dazzler was going to be in our own series with Tigra, as well as we had Howard the Duck. And this one I don't know, which is Hitmonkey. But Marvel Television is no longer. So I'm thinking, because much like if we remember, Netflix had Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, Iron Fist and Daredevil. We also had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on television for a bit. Because now Marvel is producing their own shows on Disney Plus, that does not need to be in a separate category altogether. They just want to kind of bring it all in-house. So the only two things out of that list that is going to be going forward is going to be, which we have right now, is M.O.D.O.K and then Hitmonkey. Don't ask me about Hitmonkey. I have no idea. But apparently it's a thing that we got lucky with. And I think Kevin Smith was planning to do Howard the Duck, because that's one of his favorite characters. So when all this was going to be kind of like proposed, the only two things came out of that project was only M.O.D.O.K and Hitmonkey. So if you're visually watching this on your TV, you'll see there's a comic panel of M.O.D.O.K. And this is like classic M.O.D.O.K. And a reason why I picked this, because I want people to see, when they are part of this program today, that this is the origin of this character. That it's a giant freaking head in like a hover chair, and it's weird, to say the least. It's not, it's human looking, but it's got a big noggin, you know, the N-O-G-G-I-N, noggin. So when I look at the panel, and I'm like, do I do the voice? Do I want to do this? So if I want to sound like M.O.D.O.K, the first thing I wanted to think in my head is like, I am M.O.D.O.K. Does he really sound like that? Because I can't think of another voice like, I am M.O.D.O.K. No, he's not suave. When you see that picture, you will say, yeah, I agree. He should be, I am M.O.D.O.K. And then it goes into, you know, once I was a mere human guinea pig for the scientists of AIM. Really? That's how I'm going to keep, fine, I'm just going to continue. But they did their job too well, and now I am their master. Really? That's how it's going to go. That's how I'm going to go do the voice. But we'll see how far I get into the program. But if you're listening to this and you're reading this and you're having a good time, I'm happy you're enjoying this. So if you don't know what the acronym for M.O.D.O.K means, Apparently, it kept changing because the M for M.O.D.O.K was mental and became mobile and then mechanized. And then the O.D.O.K part was organism designed only for killing. And then I was reading on in Wikipedia, and there was more stuff that it gets even weirder with the acronyms. So, like, oh my God. The first appearance for M.O.D.O.K was actually a cameo back in September of 1967. So actually, I am 1 month older than M.O.D.O.K because I was born in August of 67. So it came out in Tales of Suspense number 93. And the creators were Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. If you look at this picture, or if you go online and look up Jack Kirby and M.O.D.O.K, you can see it's a very Jack Kirby rendering. The way that he draws the extra heavy, bold outlines, that's very much in keeping of Jack Kirby's style. So it's very recognizable, and especially like the Inhumans have that same influence, and Fantastic Four. So, but yeah, that's the comic book version. When we move forward to the Hulu version, obviously they're leaning into the big-headed guy who wants to have world domination. One of the things I wanted to start off with is talk about Seth Green. I think without Robot Chicken have not been born, so to speak, this type of animation would never have been done in this fashion. But it lends itself enough that since what they do is kind of make parodies of different shows, sci-fi and superheroes and all that, and do pop culture references, it kind of makes sense to kind of do M.O.D.O.K in that sense. But I really thought of, like, you know, I love him as Chris, and Austin Powers, he was great. So I never felt like this is going to be complete garbage, right? I didn't feel that because I believed that for as long as Robot Chicken has been on the air, that he had at least sensibility, that they know what they're doing. Granted, the show is like 15 minutes long, but it's just filled with so many jokes, and it's like joke, 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 joke. And sometimes when they try to make it a little bit longer, it kind of like it's a little too much. So I was a little worried when the format would be a full episode in like 20, 27 minutes or so. In any case, what we have is the great Patton Oswalt, who, if you have not seen him in the filibuster episode in Parks and Rec, let me play a little clip here. You can watch the rest online. But how appropriate, because I'm also into kind of politics about the whole filibuster thing, is that today's filibuster, again, this is like a side note, has nothing to do with this stupid thing, but I'm mentioning this anyway. The whole thing with the filibuster is that if there was a bill that was coming to the floor that needed to be voted, you can postpone that vote via a filibuster. And that is, you stand there and you talk because you have the floor. The minute that you're done, your time is done. The vote can then continue. Well, today's filibusters, you don't have that option because they don't want to endure the length of nonstop talking. And I think the last one to do it, which I'm like, well, okay, Ted Cruz did it while reading Dr. Seuss, Green Eggs and Ham, and other things. And, you know, they just try to delay it as much as they can. I don't think they're given a chair. They cannot go to the bathroom. They cannot do any of that. So some have gone on for hours at a time trying to delay the passage of the bill or the vote for the bill. So in this case, Patton did this one, I believe it's only one take, but that initial video that we were watching just a moment ago, he did that for straight 8 minutes. And he was just like on fire. because he started crossing the stream with Star Wars and with Marvel. And after a while, people were just leaving, but he just kept on. He was in a flow of pure thought, and it was magical. So it's kind of weird and ironic that I can see what he's talking about, where you want to see Star Wars and Marvel characters kind of connect to that. But in any case, I enjoy the hell out of him, right? He was Remy in Ratatouille. So again, when you look at him doing M.O.D.O.K and using Robot Chicken as their platform, I'm like, it should work. There should not be a problem like, oh, this is pure garbage, right? That was my hesitancy initially about this. And not to knock it, but it's like, again, it wasn't a high priority thing on my list to watch it. But as I binged this, I really grew to like this show. I think the other problem too is that I saw a preview podcast where it was people interviewing Patton and I think not Seth, but someone else that was associated with the show. They gave a preview of the first episode, and I'm watching it online in real time. And I'm like, okay, I get what they're doing. It's like jokey, but I'm not laughing like ha laughing. It's just, okay, I get it. But the premise here in the middle picture is that basically M.O.D.O.K is going to be facing a divorce. He has 2 kids. His daughter Melissa looks like him, big-headed, in a chair, and Louis, his son, who is they're trying to plan his bar mitzvah. But I love the fact that they promised to earn the reason why they were even together in the first place. So we have a divorce. So and I was watching Beyond the Trailer. Grace Randolph was talking about how she thought, like, I didn't see anything funny with this. And I'm like, in that first episode, it's not. But the producer of the show says, we'll go and explore over the last couple of episodes how they got together or why they were even together in the first place. And then they kind of worked on that. The whole family dynamic of him being a newly separated dad, having to find his own place, have the kids over, but along the way, he's also trying to, take over the world and do the things that he has to do to kind of elevate his persona. So it's this weird balancing act, which is like, I get that. But there's just some stuff here that is just, I'm glad that I actually went through the whole 10 episodes because there is stuff in here that is worth your time. But I think it really picks up in the second episode where they go back in time. So M.O.D.O.K thinks that he can kind of go with his ex to a concert they miss and hoping to kind of rekindle their romance. And doing so, things open up about their relationship, and we see a younger M.O.D.O.K that's also part of this. And things happen, so we have stuff that comes from there that gets sprinkled throughout the episode. And I'm like, it's not just like a one-shot series of jokes. There's actually good storytelling here that I can appreciate and good character beats for everyone. And I really got to be like, I'm really freaking impressed. They got my attention on this. Other highlights that they had is just the wide variety of talent. Wonder Man, I think, was played by Nathan Fillion. You had Sam Hamm playing Iron Man. You even had Whoopi Goldberg at one point in there. It's a fantastic cast, and I really enjoyed them. And again, going back to what Grace's thing is, like, she wished that like Tony Stark or Iron Man was there a little bit more. And I'm like, I can see why they didn't do that. His situation doesn't require the Avengers' attention at that point. He is just like a nuisance that is easily discarded. So you didn't need to have, that type of ongoing situation. It did enough to just like, oh, Iron Man's around and so forth, so are the Avengers. But again, you didn't need to do bringing them in because the whole focus of this series is just on M.O.D.O.K. How is M.O.D.O.K going to put back his marriage? How is M.O.D.O.K going to keep his family together? All the while, he's trying to conquer the world and end the Avengers. And it comes to a really good, interesting end. Again, spoilers. The present M.O.D.O.K and the past M.O.D.O.K come to a head in which the past M.O.D.O.K had some time jewel stuck in his head. And he had told the present M.O.D.O.K that he visited the future and all the different scenarios, M.O.D.O.K was successful one time. And given that one time, for him to become the emperor of the world, so to speak, to do away with the Avengers, it was at a cost. And that was to his family. So there was a moment in which M.O.D.O.K was told this, and his family was in peril. The missiles that were going to kill them were kind of frozen, but they had this long conversation. And he says, the family was the key. And it's like, yes, I know. I'm trying to get them all together to make me a better person. It's like, no. The old M.O.D.O.K was saying, the younger M.O.D.O.K was saying, the key of your family being dead was the thing that made you become that person down the road, meaning you killed the Avengers. You were able to build your utopia that you envisioned in your locket. So that was the thing that he gave in. So we flash forward to the future and we see this picture where he has, and I love this, he actually called it an Iron Throne. As soon as he gets up, you'll see it's Iron Man in that throne. I'm like, that's great. He also has, as he's walking down the hallway, trophies of everything. Thor's hammer, Captain America's shield, even the Infinity Gauntlet is on the wall. So that was really clever, all these little Easter eggs. But what I loved about it is that I guess what he was heading to was some kind of torture chamber. That he had the younger M.O.D.O.K under a lock where he was trying to make him change the future, or at least do something to bring back his family from the dead, but to keep where M.O.D.O.K, the present M.O.D.O.K was as the emperor. So they kind of left it as a cliffhanger. We'll see if season 2 will happen, but I was like, okay, it's really damn good. I'm going to give it my time, and I really want to rewatch this again because it really caught my attention. I loved what I was shown. I can't be more upset about this. The other thing about the future of M.O.D.O.K, as I was researching, is that, again, I don't know why I did not hear about this. Couple places did talk about this, but it's not necessarily the most reputable places. But there is, this is a rumor just until I can get this confirmed, possibly that Jim Carrey will be doing the voice of M.O.D.O.K and one of the MCU movies coming out, right? One of that will be, again, speculated, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. So if that's the case, I will go with that. But I'm like, I could not find a reputable article to back up that claim. So we'll see what happens with that. The other thing, being in a library, and I was checking to see what we have in our collection. We do have the soundtrack. So I was actually kind of cool with the opening theme song, which I like a lot. So if you are a listener and if your library has Hoopla, I'm sure Hoopla will have the M.O.D.O.K soundtrack there for you. And if you're here in Miami, just go ahead and log in with your library card and your PIN number and sign up and get that soundtrack for free. The other two books that I actually have physically in my library is The Unbelievable Gwenpool and is the head of M.O.D.O.K, which I think is volume 2 of that series. And then we have the supervillain team up M.O.D.O.K's 11, which is kind of like a take on Ocean's 11. So not a lot of materials that we have on M.O.D.O.K, but given what I just watched with Hulu, I'm willing to now go and do a little bit more research about that. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is that the whole point of this series is like, it is not connected to anything what's going on in the MCU per se. So the series takes place on Earth 1226. So think of it as the multiverse, but that's their version. So Earth that is in the MCU is Earth 616. This series is Earth 1226. And what happened is that the producer for this show was kind of given the go-ahead by Kevin Feige. It's like, go ahead and do it whatever you want to do, but we'll just put it into an alternate universe. But the reason why that number 1226 came up is because it was kind of like honor Kevin's Feige's son, his date of birth. So that's his date of birth in there. So I thought that was kind of cool. I'm trying to think what else that's going to be to mention. M.O.D.O.K's children. Even though they have Melissa and Lewis, Melissa has an acronym, which is the mental entity living to induce seriously sinister anarchy. And for Lewis is lanky organism, undeniably irresistible and syphilitic. He does say that, and he says, I don't want to know what the syphilitic means. And he just left it at that. And again, I think it was really fun to watch. I really had a great time with this series. Because it's something like DC does funny, like The Brave and the Bold, right? Batman is a serious, straight man. You get the funny guys coming in like Plastic Man or Aquaman, who is like, outrageous. Constantly doing that. And I laugh my ass off. And I love that. Marvel, not so much. So I'm glad to see that Marvel actually has a win in that sense when it comes to their characters. But on that note, just want to let you know that I'll be talking about Yasuke on June 9th. And we'll see how this experiment goes about me recording before the actual program, if I can do my podcast that way. But Yasuke, if you don't know, first African samurai. So the reason why that came up is because the late Chadwick Boseman was going to be playing that character in an upcoming movie. And when I heard that this was being made, I thought that was the first thing I want to see that story come to life. So it is currently playing at Netflix. So if you have that, you want to chime in, I'll be doing that next week. After that, on June 16th, I'll be talking about Army of the Dead. That one is produced and directed and filmed by Zack Snyder. And that's all I'm going to say for right now, because I don't want to get into details, but those are the two things that I would like to talk about. And then after that, I forget the date, I think it's the 23rd, I would be talking about Jupiter's Legacy Season 1. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm trying to do. Let's see how far I can get away with doing these on a weekly basis like this. I am super happy that I got to watch this. It was super enjoyable because, again, I didn't have high hopes for this series. I had nothing but, oh, that's kind of funny. And it really tugs at certain situations that are real. That, when you have elements of separation in a family, and, you have to deal with the new norm, and how you manage to have, where do you put your priorities? Do you put family first? Do you put priorities for your own, not necessarily selfish needs, but, how do you make that work? Because that was the whole thing why they separated was he put his needs in front of his own wife, his own family. That was his interest. But when you take that away, you realize, or at least he realized, that, sometimes you take advantage of a situation and then, well, those are the consequences that you reap, So, but again, it is really damn good. I really enjoy the humor that was able to be done in this. And again, if you love Robot Chicken, and if you're worried about the extra long jokes as far as the stories, it's well paced, very enjoyable, and I cannot more highly recommend this series to you. So, but I'm just gonna leave it at that. So, but in any case, remember that you can always email me at monsterscifishow@gmail.com. You can always follow me on the various social networks. So, thank you for listening to me on the Monster Sci-Fi Show. It's sci-fi from a certain point of view. Good night.
Hey everyone, this is George Tripsis, co-host from the Metal Geeks podcast, along with Carrie the Metal Geek and Brutal Dave. Our show is where we bring the metal geek culture and heavy metal culture and mash it into the geek culture. Come listen to our show where we talk about movies, comic books, Disney stuff, and mostly about movies where I'm always right and Carrie's never right. Check us out at metalgeeks.net. You can catch us on all your ear-hole listening podcast devices.
I'm Carrie the Metal Geek, and I approve this message.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.